going to be looking at tonight is really about focusing on one topic, and it'll be coming from David, but I want to do a little preamble to kind of begin to get our minds open to leadership. As each one of you came through the door, you were looking to achieve something. And whether there is other people in the room, it's very much important about you taking away a personal journey and beginning to see how can we develop more as leaders, but begin to understand what are some of the key drivers to this terminology of service excellence. Because working from a consultancy perspective, we do come and get some kind of coined phrases sometimes that we all hook on to, but it's when we truly embrace what is that to our organization. So that it's not just playing lip service, and that's what I'm so happy for having David here to talk about his journey over the last couple of years with a service excellence program, because it's actually the active learning that we're going to pull from that. When I started thinking about what would I talk about if I had 20 minutes to speak on before David's talk, I really began to think about really what is the role of a leader. Welcome. What is the role of a leader in this service excellence challenge? We all know that we want great customer service. And I think that's been on our agenda for a very long time. What is this great service that we're looking for? But who is the driver of that service, first off? So instead of asking, what is the role of a leader, I kind of just began to look at what does service excellence mean to those that I lead and the customers that I lead? And that's when it becomes a little bit more of a defined question for us. I've been very fortunate to work with David and his team, and just recently working with a team in America, where and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight, is where we transformed Ritz-Carlton into a new fashion luxury market. And some of the learning that we had during this transformation project was fantastic, because both of those brands wanted to offer 5-star, 5-diamond service. But they offer it very differently. And that's simply by the customers in which they're offering it, the promise in which they're giving, but also that population. So the uniqueness of that particular project was very much that we were moving the same population. So they were still Ritz-Carlton, but yet now new fashion luxury. This is as a triangle that we often use at Bridge to help articulate some of this messaging on how we need to define our organization. So starting over here, where we have our core company values. Now that's not to say the company values that look like nice posters on a wall, because actually when we just put them as posters on a wall or put them out into our population without defining, they actually work as a disengager. Because for people then to have to say, well, I think this or I think that, you create a lot of discomfort in people to think, do I have the same vision for these values as my leader or my manager? So it's very important that we translate them. But the core values of our organization is everything that is our organization. It should be a part of your brand promise. When we market and advertise our organizations, when we speak about, when we tweet, whether we're using Twitter, whether we're using Facebook, all of that company information should be supported by the values, the things that make us who we are. Because brands are alive. And I speak about that all the time, that even when you study the way the brain processes brands, it's processed as a relationship. That's why we have brands we love, that's why we have brands sometimes we fall out of love with. Does anybody here ever hear yourself argue with your supplier saying, I would have expected more from whatever company? Who here said that? I just said it recently. Telling David about my Hertz car experience. But I would have expected more. However, why? Why would I expect more? Because somewhere, when they gave me at Hertz this lovely card that said I was a gold member and had 5 stars next to my name, I believed that I was special. And so therefore, I didn't feel very special when my car wasn't there for me. However, again, it hurt even more because I thought they promised me something even more. If I went to the budget one, I might have expected that. So all of that gets wrapped into the things we value. And if one of the things that we value is service excellence, then that is part of the foundation of who we are as a business. But all of that goes out to our customers, whether that customer be internal or external. Some of us are customer facing and we deal with the people who buy our products and services every day. And others are internal, whether we work in the accounting system, HR system, but our customers are the people who support the business. So I see no difference when we talk about customers. And we can give them all kinds of names. In the hotel, they're guests, some of the patients in the hospital. But at the end of the day, the ultimate word customer represents the people who we represent. And just even on a sidebar, I worked on a very interesting project, and it was for an outsourcer, and the outsourcer was HP, Hewlett Packard, but the client is Ford. And I asked many of the people in this call center, who do you work for? And often they couldn't answer. Well, HP pays my check, but Vauxhall is the people who are calling. But really, ultimately, Ford was always, to me, their employer, because those were the customers. And then as we come back down, it's really now beginning to understand this brand behavior. How is the attitude in our brand alive in our people? Because if we are striving for service excellence, that is an attitude, but it's also supported by behavior. So as I was beginning to look at all of the work that we've done, say, with David and also with and then with a client at the hotel in Palm Beach, is then going one step further and beginning to understand is what do we really believe in? Not only me as a personal leader, what do I believe in? What do I believe is the vision of the organization? But also just as an organization, what are the beliefs that support the direction of the brand? And that's when our people really start to become engaged, is when they actually have something to believe in. Because values is one step ahead, or one step below. We need to create a value structure within our business. But I don't believe that's enough anymore. It's about beginning to look at what is the DNA that supports our organizations. Because we have this brand promise. And this brand promise is a thing that goes out to all of our customers. It goes out to our employees every single day. And think about yourself even as an employee. When you accept a job, it comes with a promise. When you buy a product, it comes with a promise. When you go on a first date, I'll wake you up. And so as we look at the brands are alive, it comes with a promise. And as we begin to create this employee engagement, that is one step to building a culture. Employee engagement, now after a lot of research and a lot of thought and a lot of work, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said employee engagement offers you service excellence. I've actually started refuting a little bit of that and taking one step back. I don't believe that employee engagement necessarily gives you service excellence. The culture that creates that gives it to you. It's when the people believe, first we have to engage in something and then we have to believe in it. And that's where the next stage is, and even the work that I think that we're beginning to look at, is really, I'm in a very fortunate position that every classroom that I ever go in, I learn just as much from the experience of working with people than sometimes they do. Because we learn to listen to the movement and the DNA of our organizations. If you truly believe that your organization is alive, they're always moving. It's a living organism. It changes daily. Whether the people are coming in and out the door, it changes. Whether the customer expectation is changing with the promise. Whether it's the environment, whether it's the finance, whether it's the rain. The world never stops moving. So therefore, our culture within our organizations never stops. So we can never rest and think, wow, we've got employee engagement. The interesting thing is I've been finding is if you engage your people and give them a little bit of belief, they will create the culture themselves that supports the engagement, that it supports service excellence. We have to first be as leaders, I'll give them opportunities to be engaged in something. And I look back at all the different histories and the things that I've studied, but my first degree was in sociology and anthropology and the study of culture. And I find that so funny now that as a consultant many years later, well, not too many, we talk about culture in our organizations, But we've been talking about culture since the beginning of man. As a species, we've been building cultures. So why is it so hard for organizations to understand probably one of the most basic things that it is to be human? To create a support network, to gather people of similar mindsets together, and collectively they do great things. That's what man has been doing since caveman days. But yet we think, from a management consultancy point of view, that we are the first people to ever create a culture. Cultures behave organically. And so that's why I say we have a brand promise. And in that brand promise, we engage our people to the things we promise. And when we have people who believe in something and believe in their environment, and with our support as leaders, we create a culture, a belief of people who want to make a difference in the service. So to end my little piece, I wanted to give you just 4 thinking points. And I'm happy to share these slides with you so you don't have to write them all down. But as I was sitting, and I only did this afternoon because I wanted to spend just a lot of time thinking about what would I say in 20 minutes. Because anybody who knows me knows I don't say anything in 20 minutes. I don't even order a pizza in 20 minutes. But the thing that I wanted to remember as a leader is being knowledgeable. Know your brand name. Again, the interesting thing that I got to experience in the last 6 months with this most recent project, and I lived on property in this hotel for 6 months. And I would come back to London for a couple of weeks, and then we would go back, and our team was just back and forth. So I as much as it slightly became painful at times, living in a 5-star, 5-diamond property in Palm Beach, with a nice gym, which I never got to, and a swimming pool. The interesting thing, and you never stopped working. Because when I walked out of my room, I was always greeted by some of the most happy hoteliers. Or sometimes non-happy hoteliers, who wanted to tell me their problems. But what I had the fortunate thing to experience in this last 6 months is I totally immersed myself in a business. I worked in it, I lived in it, I gave myself a challenge of knowing everybody's name and 600 people in the population. I could probably name 500. And I can honestly say that I love them. And they love me. I've been blessed to be submersed into this culture, but watching them grow and shape because they weren't happy when I arrived. And so what I really got to do is really got to know the brand behavior. Because the interesting thing with this brand was they believed, because it was a Ritz-Carlton, and they kept the same population, and they were moving them to a new fashion luxury program. Where they struggled, what it was partly, was loyalty. They felt if they fell in love with the new brand, they were being disloyal to their old brand. And so it's understanding how the brand shapes and changes. But when they actually realized that they could be, it wasn't about loyalty, they should be thankful for the first brand for giving them great skills so they could develop a new brand. And when we learn to talk to them about how the brand behaves, because one brand behaves very differently than another, and it behaves differently from another because it has a different output. Starbucks behaves differently than a boutique diner. Would you agree? Because its brand behavior is to offer consistency. I was in Beijing, and the first thing that I did when I saw Starbucks was I walked straight in. I don't walk into a Starbucks ever. I don't particularly like their coffee. But I wanted consistency. It gave me exactly what I needed. So think about what is the behavior of your brand. Because every brand and every culture behaves differently. And when you can tap into that behavior, that's when you truly get inside the DNA of your people. Because it is that behavior that needs to be replicated in the service that you offer. And that was interesting when I looked at when we went from one brand behavior, being 5-star program, to another brand behavior. They're getting new types of guests coming in. Some are repeat because they want to come back, but they're also getting new guests. That's because the brand behaves differently, so it welcomes different behaviors through a door. Therefore, they have to then hire differently. Because one brand behavior, like a consistent brand, doesn't want people to think too much. They want people who can be told exactly what to do the same way all the time and be happy with it. But a unique brand, a one-off brand, needs to have people who are able to think and move and shape as fast as the market does. So when you go back to your businesses, whatever that business is, ask yourself, how does my business behave? Think about it as a human. And then that is how it then begins to offer the service. Because that behavior should be wrapped in your promise. The next one is be inspiring and take some risks. I think sometimes as leaders, we all get so caught up in the transactional, the paperwork, and all of the stuff that stops us from being great leaders. Great managers, but have more faith in our people to discover great things. Be a participant in the growing of your culture. Because saying service excellence or saying leadership, but also having faith that the great spirit that you have inside you does cascade out. Because if you are an inspirational leader, have true faith that that will rub off on people. And I can make lists of people in my head, and I look at organizations sometimes and think, sometimes I think organizations need 2 managing directors. Almost, because most of managing directors are having to be 2 people. They're having to be the transactional manager of keeping that boat running and going full steam ahead, but they're also having to be the inspirational leader at the same time. It's tough when you're a leader to be juggling both of those personalities of having to do all the transactional and sometimes the telling off and sometimes get it right and do this, but also be inspirational at the same time. I think leaders get a lot of flack. I'm writing an article at the moment, and this came to me when I was writing it, thinking about sometimes how leaders, you lose your temper a little bit with your leader. You get frustrated, and all of a sudden you get your fingers pointed at. You're not a very good leader because you're supposed to be always inspirational. You ever hear that? Sometimes we have to be both. But have faith in your people that when you're inspirational, have faith that some of that rubs off and they'll do great things. Be innovative and ensure your approach is fresh. When we talk about service excellence, or we talk about leadership, or we talk about culture, because as I mentioned earlier, I believe culture and brands are organic. So therefore, because they're organic, they are always shaping and changing. Therefore, our style of leadership has to shape and change with the culture and the way it grows. An interesting thing that we do at Bridge is if we're doing, say, a 5-module program, and this is one of the things that we did with David, and we also have done with when we launched the values, we did it in 5 series. And it was an interesting conversation that I've had on more than one occasion with clients, is some clients want to have all 5 modules signed off and given to them. Because the 5 modules, it's going to be over the next 6 months or 8 months of training. I want to have all 5 signed off so I can say, yes, I agree with that training. And I always fight against that. And the way I actually articulate it so I can fight that battle with clients is simply say, fine, I will do that if you sign a contract saying that when I finish module 1, I've not changed your organization in any way. Because if I change your organization, the stuff I designed for module 2 is going to be no good. And by module 3, it's going to be even more obsolete. Because if you're looking at developing your people and you're having to sign up the next year's project to develop your people, I believe you're doing it wrong. Because everything that you do should be organic. And if you believe that something that you're doing is so powerful that it's going to change your population, then how are you preparing month 3 to be delivered the same way? So always be fresh and always be continuous your approach. And that's what I say with training. How can somebody sign off a year's training program if the training was designed to inspire people to be different? It doesn't make sense to me. And then have fun and really get to know your team. I think one of the things that I really learned by living and breathing this last project, by being there, was how many amazing people existed within their team. There was artists and painters and musicians and real people that were supporting the service excellence of the programs. And when we as leaders get amongst them, it's that real stuff. Being a real leader with real people, I believe, is the way leadership needs to move. And I tried to draw it, and since I can't draw it, it never happened. But I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were having this conversation. Remember, lead from the top, top-down leadership, bottom-up leadership, sideways leadership. Over the years, consultants have come up with all kinds of ways to draw a triangle. Oh yeah, we're going to have sideways leadership, and the leader's over here. And I asked him to draw me the way he thought leadership should be going forward, and he drew it like a peanut. And I asked him, why did he draw it that way? And because of the name of the hotel is O, and Os is French for water, he said it in a total O way. He said, well, because O, like water, always adapts to its environment. It changes to the shape in which you put it in. And so I think that leadership is just really all over the place. He said there is no linear lines to leadership. So it's just like a big blob on a paper some days. Sometimes I'm in the big blob, sometimes I'm in the bottom blob, sometimes I'm in this little bit in the middle, but I'm just floating around in this great big blob trying to make it move. And as he said that, I just thought, wow, I'm going to tell that story. Because consultants spend a lot of time making triangles, when leadership will never fit in a triangle, as does as your team. And so I just wanted to play, when I was doing this project, you know the song Happy? Happy became quite synonymous with our project. And I just came back last week from our final closing ceremony. And so we had a series of presentations, and you'll see in the background of this little video clip, one of the things that we got them to do at the beginning was we told them about what the new brand was going to be, but we gave them blank canvases. And on these blank canvases, we set up an art gallery and we let them paint what they thought the vision of the organization was going to be. So in the background of this video, you get to see a couple of their clips. But that's the way we started the project, by saying, you show me your vision. And what happened was, we found amazing artists where they never knew they were artists. But also, the song Happy became quite synonymous. So the way we decided to end the project was, after this talk, and we ran this talk 9 times, was I just filmed them being happy. And then we're going to clip it together into a YouTube video, and I want it to go viral. And that's going to be our gift to them, as when they finish, is we've already clipped it together, but we're going to put it on YouTube. This is only a small little excerpt from it. But that's the kind of thing that really inspired them. It was fun. And this is just a little bit of the hoteliers.
Because I'm happy, I'm alone if you feel like a room without you. Because I'm happy, I'm alone if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy, I'm alone if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy, I'm alone if you feel like that's what you want to do.
So that's only a tiny excerpt of, and thank you to our editing team for having to watch all of them. But that was just a little excerpt. But when I said that to them at the end of this program, that I just wanted to clap, just to film them being happy to a song that had, something that had connected all of us together during the 6 months. And I said to them, would you be happy if I put this on YouTube and it went viral? Do you think they were excited by that? They were ecstatic by it. They saw it as a little bit of a marker of their own. And so whatever that marker is that you create, we have to begin to see understand what inspires our people. To me, it's not about me being on YouTube. To them, they thought it was just a real great testament to show how they could show the world as a single brand how happy and connected they were. That was not the team that we started with 8 months ago. Because 8 months ago, they had lost their jobs. And they had no brand to be part of. And so think about that as a leader, as you go through. We need to be inspirational. We need to be knowledgeable about the DNA of our brand. But the job is to engage our people, but then to also give them the support of the things that we believe in as a unit. So that I will conclude there, and now I'm going to pass you over to David to talk about some real activity on what he has done. Now, I was very fortunate, and David and I just said, at least when you guys were, when we were being a bit late, we got a good chance to catch up, so that was nice. I met David initially probably about 3 years ago, and I think he's a true visionary within service excellence, personally. And I know that working with David and his team has inspired me to be better, because as I said earlier, as a consultant, when we engage with an organization, we are part of the organization. And being part of the organization, it always teaches you as a leader just as much as you teach it. If you listen to it, if you feel its pulse. And to watch his team grow and shape over this period has been amazing. But coming from a leadership perspective, and to introduce David properly, is, as I was saying, he's a true visionary, because to put service excellence as a differentiator in healthcare, at the time when we began this project, was kind of unheard of. We didn't see a lot of healthcare organizations saying, hang on, what makes us different? And I won't go too far into the story of HJE, because I want David to tell you that. But sometimes I believe in fate, and sometimes I believe that we choose our clients just as much as they choose us. And I felt something different the day I walked into HJE for the very first meeting. They do have something different there. They do have something at their culture. So it wasn't starting like with a new brand. It was developing an existing team and culture and giving them some more guidance. And I think as a leader, I know David's got a strong vision of where he wants the service excellence. And with that leadership, it's moving and it's growing and it's shaping, and I see the team begin to connect. So I'm going to pass you over to David to give us a little bit of background on that. And I will hand you that clicker. And thank you, David.